Hello, everybody. Transfer silly season has officially begun. And now that Spurs have reached the promised land of the UEFA Champions League, the purse strings that seemed like they would be so tightly controlled this summer will now be loosened to allow some exciting new signings to come in and for the required squad building to continue. Meanwhile, I'll also be discussing the transfer rumours around the other Premier League clubs, including reports of a fight for Milan's wide genius Rafael Leao, Manchester City as ever going for anyone who's ever laced up a pair of boots, and Newcastle joining the race for Ipswich Bulldog Liam Delap. All this and more on today's Daily Premier League Transfer News Live. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. How are you all feeling a week of basking in the glow of that Europa League victory for Tottenham Hotspur? If you are watching, thanks so much for your support. Please do press that like button. Please do become a subscriber if you're not already. And you can find me on the podcast platforms too, be that Apple Podcast or Spotify. Just go over there, type in the Spurred On podcast and give me a subscribe or a follow. Straight in, Cantab in the comments says, is company parting company with Leroy Sane? He is available on a free transfer this summer, and Spurs, according to reports last night, have been offered the opportunity to sign the Bayern Munich winger. Obviously, he used to play for Manchester City. As I mentioned, he becomes a free agent when his Bayern contract ends at the end of this month. Spurs T-Rex in the comments says, no, Leroy, please, God, no. Interesting, because he's obviously a big name, and big name players, hugely talented players as well, players in their prime, as Leroy Sane is, often excite fan bases. And we have been talking at Spurs for a long time about how we need players who are going to improve the first team straight away. However, I do wonder whether signing players, and I've mentioned this before, so those of you who watch regularly may have heard this a few times, but signing players who are already on huge wages and have had their huge moves, and Sane's played for City and Bayern Munich. Realistically, at the back end of his 20s now, Sane will be looking for kind of one last big contract, and that is my fear, and I don't think that fits with the Tottenham transfer strategy at the moment. Let's go through Sane's stats from the past season. He had an impressive year with Bayern Munich. 29 league appearances, 11 goals and 5 assists. He also got 2 yellow cards and played a total of 1,605 minutes. How do you feel about Leroy Sane potentially joining Tottenham on a free transfer? How does it potentially link with Son Heung-min's future? Obviously, Sane, a wide forward, someone who can play across that front line. Do you expect Sonny to stay at the club after achieving the promised land of lifting that Europa League trophy for Spurs? I do think there is a possibility that Sonny leaves this summer, but I'm not really sure that replacing him with a player who will cost astronomical amounts in wages is the right idea. I'm not sure. Spurs T-Rex, thank you so much for your comment. Says, I watched every Bayern Munich game since Harry joined. He went months without scoring, talking about Sane. Missed so many open goals. He's selfish, and he cost Harry Kane about 15 goals. Big ego. These are all reasons why I'm not sure that signing Leroy Sane would be a great idea. But I don't know. Let's see what happens. At the moment, I just actually released a TikTok video in the last half an hour about my fears for big Ange Postecoglou. So go over to my TikTok, which is Barnaby Slater Comedy, and check that out. I fear right now that Ange Postecoglou is perhaps going to get fired by Spurs, and that Daniel Levy is going to wait a week or so as to try and let the positivity and the excitement around Ange Postecoglou almost die down. And the reason I'm bringing this up around Leroy Sane is because I think there will also be a slight delay perhaps in what we do in the transfer market based on the decision that will be made surrounding the manager and any potential future managers that come in. Cantab says, I like Leroy Sane for his versatility. He might take a cut to say 200 grand a week, in which case I'm guessing Cantab says that could be a goer. I mean, 200 grand a week would be a cut for Leroy Sane, but for Spurs, that would make him one of our highest earners. In fact, perhaps along with Sonny, our highest earner in total. So for me, overall, I think Sane would be a mistake, but I don't know. Let's see what happens. Okay, moving on to the next report. And a rumour that won't go away. Tottenham are actively pursuing Ryan Cherki and ready to trigger his £25 million release clause, which I will tell you, £25 million for Ryan Cherki. He's an absolute steal for the Lyon maestro. He's one of Spurs' top targets, and Tottenham apparently did make direct contact with Cherki's representatives back in January, and that Lyon were aware of that and were also contacted. Now, this is the kind of signing I can get behind a lot more. Young, exciting, talented player. Like I've said before, I still don't feel like Spurs have really replaced Christian Eriksen properly since we let him go to Inter Milan. And Cherki is that kind of maestro, and also at a good age. He's had good stats this season. In Liga for Lyon, he made 28 league appearances. He scored 8 goals and provided 10 assists. That's nearly 2,000 minutes on the pitch. Across all competitions, he featured in 42 matches, scoring 12 goals and contributing 19 assists. And his standout performances earned him the title of Liga's top assist provider of the season. Notably, he excelled in expected assists as well, ranking among the top players in Liga for expected assists per match. And he recorded an impressive 1.3 expected assists in a single game against Le Havre back in late 2024. He has confirmed that he will be leaving Lyon this summer, having been there for 6 years. And he has been linked with Spurs, but also this morning, some quite strong links for Ryan Cherki to Manchester City as well, which would be a worry really for Spurs fans who like the look of Cherki, because you'd think City would be able to blow us out of the water in terms of the wages that they could pay Cherki. However, I'm choosing to try and look at it positively, because what we've been really good at over the last few seasons, and Ange Postecoglou has helped us with this as well, is persuading young, talented players to come to Spurs rather than making a huge move to a huge club quite yet, because they will get game time at Spurs. They will be able to push on in their career in terms of learning the Premier League. I'm talking specifically about Lucas Bergvall here, who, by the way, apparently swept the board at the Tottenham Supporters Club Awards, which is amazing for him. But I think players like Cherki should look at Bergvall, look at Archie Gray, and say, oh, wow, they've played like 30 plus games this season in their first year in the Premier League. And if I go to Tottenham maybe first before taking a huge move to a mega club, then that could be best for not kind of... I guess what I'm talking about is sometimes these young players can get their moves to huge clubs like Barcelona, who are interested in Bergvall, or Man City, and then sit on the bench because they're deemed kind of too young and not ready to play in the Premier League. Whereas they come to Spurs, someone like Cherki could come to Spurs and then really straight away get in the team, prove what he's got, show creativity in the team, and then maybe in 2, 3, 4 years' time can get his huge career big move then. Robert Yee, I think, talking about Sane, says overpriced ever since. He's gone beyond a 10 out of 10 winger. 200,000 plus is overpriced. Sane numbers will drop. Meme Hook talking about Cherki says, come to Spurs as a stepping stone. Same old, tired of it. Okay, that's interesting, Meme Hook. Listen, the way I look at that is, I don't think stepping stone is the right term. It kind of shows negativity. But in reality, Tottenham are a club at the moment who are not competing for Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues. So we're building this strategy, as we did kind of in the early days of Levy and Enoch and Martin Jol, and back in those days when we would buy the best young English talent and let them play brilliantly for Spurs for 3 or 4 years and then get their big moves to like Manchester United. So for instance, players like Michael Carrick, or in terms of Manchester United, we bought in Dimitar Berbatov from Bayer Leverkusen. He played 3 or 4 years brilliantly for Spurs and then got his huge move. Same with Gareth Bale and his huge move to Real Madrid. I don't look at that as a negative. I don't look at it as a stepping stone. I look at it as realistic in terms of where Spurs are compared to other clubs at the moment. And I personally prefer it to what was happening when we had Conte, which is when he's buying kind of the likes of Perisic, or when we had Jose, when he's buying like Matt Doherty, who are players supposedly kind of in their prime or just outside their prime, on huge wages, who then don't really play that well for us either. I like the idea of us as a young, hungry club where the young players who are hungry as well are growing with the club and trying to take us to the next level. But thank you for your comment, Meme Hook. I appreciate it. Kieran Proper, thanks for getting in the comments. Says, good morning. Great way to start my workday. Thanks for the stream. No problem. I will be trying to do these daily transfer videos at 12:30 live whenever I can, guys. So keep an eye out for that. Murphy369 says, Barnaby, who is going to go out the exit door from our team? Any ideas? I think the ones that I think are most likely are those ones who don't get on the pitch that much. So starting, I think, with Richarlison, realistically, and Ben Davis, I think, probably. I will go on to talk about Christian Romero. There's been some real updates in his potential move away from the club from what we're hearing from Atletico Madrid and from Romero's camp himself. So I'll get into that in a second. Sai's going to go, says, I feel like we're going to sign 2 players and call it a difficult window. Okay, I mean, let's see what happens. I don't want to be in like what I deem to be kind of the first day of the transfer merry-go-round thinking how terrible it's going to be for Spurs. We have actually signed a lot of players over the past few years and just had a lot of players come in even during his 2 years. So I'm not sure I'm going to look at it as a negative potential. Trini says, City have Foden, Savinho on the right. So Cherki wouldn't get any game time. Yeah, so that would be a good reason for him to potentially come to Spurs instead. Trung says, do you think by getting rid of Ange, player morale will be affected? Previous managers have lost support of players, but it seems our success has been due to how loyal players have been to Ange. I will come on to talking about Ange, guys, and the latest, and I'll talk about what the players are. But I do think the fact that the players are all clearly incredibly behind Big Ange is one of the reasons he's still in his job right now. Whether he will still be in his job in a week's time remains to be seen. But yeah, I think it could potentially affect the morale of the players, Trung. I really appreciate it. Liam Pitt disagrees about Sane. He says Sane is still a massive upgrade on Johnson, Son and Tell. I think on paper, Leroy Sane is an upgrade on Johnson and Tell. But I think if potentially he came here and it was really for money and one last contract and then he wasn't that bothered about trying hard, then that wouldn't be an upgrade. Okay, before I move on to talk about some more transfer talk, guys, please, there are over 130 of you watching concurrently. Thank you so much for your support. Please, if you haven't already, do press that like button. The more likes we get, the more Spurs fans will see this in their suggested videos. Okay, also some talks that Spurs are exploring a move for former Aston Villa and Brazilian midfielder Douglas Luiz. He is at Juventus. Contacts with the players have been held in recent days, and he is open apparently to a return to England. The transfer fee would be between 35 million and 40 million euros. Now, Douglas Luiz was highly rated at Aston Villa, got his move to Juventus, and it's really stalled his career. During this last season, Serie A, he made 19 appearances for Juve, but only started in 3 matches. He came on as a substitute in 16 of those 19 games. He didn't register a single goal or assist. He got 2 yellow cards. The reason for this lack of playing time is due to multiple injuries, including muscle issues that sidelined him for several matches in the winter of 24 and early 25. Do we need to be signing another player who struggles with muscle injuries? Certainly not, especially if Ange Postecoglou is to stay as manager. So for me, Douglas Luiz would not be a good idea. Yes, we're right to be looking for that natural number 6, a player who can push Rodrigo Bentancur in that position, who maybe they can play as a double pivot sometimes. But to bring in a player who has injury issues when we have had so many problems with injuries, I think would be a big mistake by the club and is not something that I think we should be doing. Di says, Barnaby, why are we getting linked to Xavi? What's Xavi done as a manager that would make him a good manager for us? He's been out of work for a while, and I think there's a reason for that. Well, I think the main reason we're being linked with him is probably because he is out of work. And therefore, it's an easy one for the kind of bookies and the journalists to grab onto. I would be incredibly surprised if Xavi became our manager. I think we are potentially, from all the reports I hear, definitely looking for a manager with Premier League experience at this time. Let's have a look in the comments. Gamecock says, do we look at Kobe Mainu? So the reports coming out of Manchester United that the likes of Alejandro Garnacho and potentially Kobe Mainu could be available for transfer because it would mean pure profit to Manchester United in terms of money that they could then go on and spend, because that's how it works in financial fair play. The fact that Tottenham beat them in the Europa League final and therefore Manchester United do not have the money from the Champions League coming in, I think will push them to sell. I think certainly Garnacho. I don't know if you saw this, but the report coming out yesterday from they're on this bizarre friendly trip, postseason friendly trip in Asia. Reports are that Ruben Amorim said to Garnacho, you'd better pray that you find another club who wants to take you. So it looks like both Amorim and the club are pushing Garnacho out for, they want to get about £60 million for him. I do think Garnacho is an exciting young player, but it's his attitude that he's maybe got a bit above his station at Manchester United. But you've got to say, at Man United, no players have really massively improved there for years. So he could be a talented player to look at. Kobbie Mainoo, I really like. But I think United fans would probably be up in arms if they sold Kobbie Mainoo. I really don't know if that would be a good idea for Manchester United to sell Kobbie Mainoo, but it remains to be seen, I guess. Murphy369 says, what do you say about Federico Chiesa or Nico Schlotterbeck instead of Dragusin? Well, Dragusin has an ACL injury, so he's going to be out, I think, probably till Christmas next season. So we can't really think about replacing him at the moment, really. Schlotterbeck has been on a lot of big clubs' list for a while. But clearly both good players. But at the moment, I don't think we can be looking to spend a lot of money to replace Dragusin. Trini says, great thing about having Ange is his charisma and his convincing of players in the transfer market. I completely agree. And I don't think we should forget about that. And like I said earlier, those phone calls that he's made to persuade players to get over the line have been really important for Spurs. Okay, let's talk about Christian Romero. Spurs are showing a reluctance, apparently, to even hold negotiations over a deal for Romero with Atletico Madrid. Some rumours are also suggesting that Romero's future at Tottenham is intertwined with big Ange Postecoglou's, in that he says, according to some reports coming out in the media over the last 24 hours, that if Ange Postecoglou is sacked by Spurs, then he will ask to leave. However, apparently, possibly, if Ange Postecoglou were to keep his job at Tottenham, then Romero would be interested in starting negotiations for a new contract. So that's interesting potential news. Romero did put out a Instagram message as well over the last 24 hours. He said, we achieved what we wanted this season as a group, and that's what matters. And my name is part of the history of this beautiful club. I want to thank you all for the love and support every day, despite everything. But I have no doubt that staying together led to success. We must continue. This is the path. So some surprising almost positivity about the future at Tottenham Hotspur from Christian Romero there. Let me know what you think about that. It hasn't really seemed over the last 6 months or so like there's any chance whatsoever of Romero staying at Spurs, but I'd say my thoughts on him potentially staying have improved slightly since reading that Instagram post. But let's see what happens. C9 Manic talking about Xavi saying he won La Liga. That's a fair point. Kieran Proper asks, is no news good news if you want Ange to stay? I don't know for sure. My fear, like I said, I did a TikTok video about this that I released earlier. My fear is that Levy is trying to just let the vibes kind of calm down so that then in a week's time or so, when maybe Tottenham fans are thinking less with their hearts and more than their heads, maybe that is when he would go on to sack Ange Postecoglou. That is my fear at the moment. Edem says, Barnaby, with Villa not making Champions League, what about testing the water for Boubacar Kamara? Good player. There are some really good Villa players there who, if all is to believe, Villa may need to look at selling to get through financial fair play. The likes of Jacob Ramsey, who's been on our list for a long time. Kamara is a good player, so it'd be interesting to see what happens there. So I was going to go well, says Mainoo would be amazing, and that you would take Garnacho as well. Ryan Law says, fashionably late to the party. Hey, Barnaby in the chat. And Checkmate734 says, Ange is staying. Let's see what happens. Kusti says, in terms of Romero, sounds like negotiation tactics and like he knows something that we don't. Tony Ten Barros has strong feelings about the next manager, says we need Iraola as coach, please. Fresh start. We need fresh coach and fresh players. On the same subject, C9 Manic says, I can't quite fathom why we look at the likes of Thomas Frank and Iraola as beneath us. Poch was hired from Southampton after doing a very similar job. I agree that I think one of the reasons why we're looking at the likes of Iraola and Frank is because of what happened with Pochettino. Although Pochettino did have an incredibly strong personality, kind of force of personality, I'm slightly fearful that Iraola doesn't have that. I do like everything I see of Frank, but I do think at the moment, and let me know what you guys think in the comments, I do think it's a potentially dangerous move to sack Ange and bring someone in like Thomas Frank. At this point, I don't think the fans would love that. Okay, Fabrizio Romano says that Marcus Rashford will be available for Man United for £40 million this summer, and that because Aston Villa did not make it into the Champions League, that he will not be interested in going there. Spurs fans, would you be interested in taking Rashford for £40 million based on what you saw of him at Aston Villa? His stats since joining them in January, 17 appearances, 4 goals, 6 assists, 16 starts, 9 substitute appearances, 35 shots. He helped Villa get to the Champions League quarter-final, which was really impressive for them, and the Cup semi-finals, and he got a recall back into the international team. Would you look at Marcus Rashford? Do you think he could potentially give good options for Spurs in the wide left department or in the centre forward department? Would you take him over Richarlison if we sold Richarlison, got money, say, from Everton or Saudi Arabia for Richarlison, maybe somewhere near what we signed him for, kind of 40 to 50 million pounds? Would you then spend 40 on Rashford? What do you think? Let's have a look what you guys are saying in the comments. Delta Bar says Rashford would be great. Just depends on how his wages impact the rest of the plans. Really good point. Rashford is thought to be on over £300,000 a week at Manchester United. But realistically for me, no club is going to match those wages. That is a perfect example of why Man United have been run into the ground. And Rashford is going to need to take a wage cut. Absolutely no doubt about that. Cantab says Sane is better than Rashford. Kieran Proper says Rashford sounds okay for 40 until you see his wages along with 40. Good point. Crooks says no Rashford, please. Ryan Law says Rashford wage like Grealish's wage would price Spurs out. Eugene says I wouldn't mind having Rashford. We need more backup players for the next season. And Trini says Rashford over Richarlison. Lily White-Yeard says no to Rashford. Okay. Just some reports now from John Cross in the Daily Mirror over the last 24 hours that the expectation remains that Ange Postecoglou will be sacked by Tottenham Hotspur. This coincides with a little bit of almost like a PR outreach from some of the Spurs players who have been so supportive over Big Ange Postecoglou over the last 24 to 48 hours. James Maddison was interviewed by Sky Sports. He said this, yeah, he's been brilliant. Even at the start of the season, Ange was saying, I don't usually win things. I always win things. It's one of them. We knew that would create a big uproar in the media with you lot never shutting up about it. But never once did I stop believing that he meant it. The season 3 line was iconic as well. And he's got those in the locker, the motivational mic drop moments. Managers and clubs, you don't need a bigger example than Tottenham, can go long periods without winning trophies, 17 years. But he's a man who's always had success. And he's a man who I think his biggest strength is his self-belief in what he does. And that feeds off into us. And that's been installed into us in Europe this year. All the away games, and even the ones early in the group stages and the round of 16, we had a really bad performance away at AZ Alkmaar. And he went heavy on us because, you just know he's a winner. And then we turned it around in the second leg and we're in the quarters. And every step we got closer and closer and we believed more and more. And now we're the winners and no one can take that away from us. Really interesting to see James Maddison so supportive of Ange Postecoglou, because I was certainly one of those people who feared that Maddison and Postecoglou had a bit of a falling out because Maddison wasn't getting as many games as it seemed like he would have wanted for sure. But really supportive of him there. As was Archie Gray when asked about Ange Postecoglou. He said, we've obviously had some really tough times and we stuck together. He's big on things like family. And I think the main thing that helped us get to the final and win the final is our morals of what we're like as a team. Like I said, family is our main thing. We believe in each other and it's like brothers going out there on the pitch in the final and we just fought for each other. Lucas Bergvall was also asked whether he wants Ange Postecoglou to be the manager of Spurs next season. He said 100%. I think he's done a great job. It's not been easy for any of us, especially because of all the injuries. But as he said, he always wins things in his second year. And that's true. So a real PR message from the players about wanting Ange Postecoglou to stay. Tony Tenbarrow says Maddison needs to leave. He's never fit. And Custy says, to be fair, no player is going to come out and say Ange should be sacked. Okay, I think that's an interesting point, Custy. And thank you so much for your comment. But I do think those comments are quite effusive in their praise of Ange Postecoglou. I agree with you that they're not going to come out and say that he should be sacked, but to be so kind of effusive in praise and so positive about the family element and stuff like that, I do genuinely think there's an actual bond between the players and the manager, and that I think has to be taken into account by Daniel Levy. But as I've said a few times, and I actually heard some people on some of the other podcasts say this as well, which I was really pleased to hear. I do think Ange needs to basically repitch for his own job with Daniel Levy and say to him what he's going to change next season to turn around the results of the last season, but also the last 18 months in the league, really. It's not just been 12 months, it's been 18 months since those first 10 league games, really. So Ange is going to need to tell Daniel Levy how he's going to change tactically and also in terms of making sure he gets more players fit on the pitch. C9 Manic in the comments says, if Ange does go, someone I'd love for us to look seriously at is Liam Rosenior in Liga. He's done a great job with a historically young side at Strasbourg. Liam Rosenior, I think, from the little I know about his managerial career, has done well pretty much everywhere and been treated pretty badly. But I don't think personally he's got the status that I think Tottenham will be looking for in the next manager. And he doesn't have the Premier League experience as well. Sean ODB says it's taken a while to get that kind of rapport back in the dressing room. That's another really great point. Spurs haven't had a manager since Poch who the players have really fallen for in the way they've fallen for Ange Postecoglou. So I think that's it. Paul from Singapore asks, Paul, could you do an Ange in, Ange out poll on YouTube to get a sense of how your viewers are leaning? Well, during this live show, I can just ask you to write in the comments, are you Ange in or Ange out? And we'll try and get an idea of how you guys are all feeling. Meanwhile, Ange actually won an award yesterday. He won the John Duncan Award, which is awarded by the League Managers Association and recognizes those who've achieved historic and notable successes for their clubs this season. On the same subject, though, apparently, according to reports coming out from Italy, Tottenham remain interested in appointing the Inter Milan manager Simone Inzaghi. He has planned decisive talks with Inter Milan, that is, after the Champions League final, to determine whether he will remain at the club. It's such an Italian manager thing. Conte does it all the time to potentially win big trophies and then just leave your job, to fall out with your chairman. That's a reason why, for me, I wouldn't be keen on us appointing another Italian. I don't want to sound kind of, anti-Italian in any way here, but they're just so passionate and they fall out with their chairman too easily. Also, Simone Inzaghi has talked about his interest in going to Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia. He said there's interest from Italy and Saudi Arabia too, but it would be crazy to think about that with the final to play on Saturday. I'll meet with the Inter Milan board after the final. If the conditions are right, we'll continue together. I mean, it just sounds very Antonio Conte, doesn't it? Okay, so at the moment, Kanteb says Ange in, Ryan says out, Paul says in, Tony says out, Eugene says in. Alexis Portier says Ange has to explain how he's going to keep those repeat goals in the same spots that killed us so many times. Otherwise, I'd love him to stay. I agree. Trung is undecided. C9 Manic says I'm Ange out. Inzaghi says I'm Ange out. So it's a little bit more Ange out from you guys than it is Ange in at the moment in the comments. Although Adam Potter now says Ange in, and Ryan hilariously says shake it all about. That's right. In out, in out. Chris Savidas says Ange out. Ed M says, I'd probably make a change, but I could be wildly wrong. So I just leave it to the ones who decide to make that decision and back it. For me, don't make a change unless we've got a replacement who the Spurs fans will get excited by and who has done it before, been there and done it before. Okay, moving on. Mickey van der Ven has been named in the Netherlands squad for the upcoming FIFA World Cup qualifiers. I wish he hadn't. I wish he'd just been let to have a great holiday personally, but let's see. Hopefully he can just stay fit. Richarlison has been called to the Brazilian national team squad. Good for you, Rishi. He's been brilliant the last week, and he was vital in that final. Now, some more transfer talk about a player who's been on Tottenham's list for a while. Joe Bellingham visited Eintracht Frankfurt yesterday to try and get to know the club and hold some talks. His stats for Sunderland this season have been very impressive indeed. 43 appearances at such a young age, 4 goals, 3 assists, nearly 4,000 minutes played, 10 yellow cards and 1 red card. Featured in all 3 of Sunderland's playoff matches. And his performances were instrumental in getting Sunderland promoted via the playoff final against Sheffield United. What do you think of Joe Bellingham from what you've seen? If you're a Spurs fan, would you like to take Joe Bellingham at your club? And then the final bit of Spurs news before I go into some more wide-ranging Premier League transfer news. Ryan Mason is the leading candidate to be the West Brom boss. He will hold talks over the next few days. Where are you at with Ange's coaching team? Would you like to see him replace the coaching team, maybe to bring something new in if he stays in the job? Do you think that would make a difference? Obviously, Chris Davis was our assistant manager last season, and then he got the Birmingham job, has done brilliantly there. Ryan Mason looks like he might be going to West Brom. Matty Wells, very highly thought of, and is the grandson of an ex-Spurs legend as well. So maybe Matty Wells should stay, whatever happens. But let's see. All right, guys, before I go into some more wide-ranging Premier League transfer news, please, if you haven't already, do press like on this video. The more likes we get, the more this will go into people's suggested videos. Also, if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please do press that subscribe button. I'm going to be bringing you daily transfer talk and transfer rumors during this window, always starting, of course, with the rumours around my team, Tottenham Hotspur. So if you're not a subscriber, please do press that subscribe button. And you can become a member as well, Patreon or YouTube membership, £1 a month only, and it really helps support me make this content for you. All the details of how are in the description box below. Okay, starting at Man United, who are in a hole at the moment. Any move for Victor Gyökeres for them is now off the table because they didn't reach the Champions League. They have held talks apparently with Brentford forward Brian Mbeumo. Brentford value him about £50 million. Newcastle also interested. Would you be interested, Spurs fans, in Brian Mbeumo potentially coming to Tottenham Hotspur? Meanwhile, Bruno Fernandes, their captain, basically their best player, considering a huge £200 million offer from Saudi Arabia. Chelsea, Bayern, and United all interested in trying to sign Rafael Leao. I think he's a brilliant player, and I wish Spurs were interested in him. But the transfer fee at about £100 million. Casemiro, and as I mentioned earlier, Garnacho expected to leave Manchester United. They also apparently want Nelson Semedo from Wolves. Before I move on to some other Premier League teams, let's get back into the comments and see what you guys are all saying. Delta Bar says about Ange Postecoglou, how can you keep a manager who just set a record for the most losses by a team not relegated? It's an interesting point, but he did win our first trophy in 17 years. So that's how. Ryan Law says 100% take Joe Bellingham. C9 Manic says, unpopular opinion, I would be way more bothered if Van de Ven left than Romero leaving this summer. I actually agree with that. We have Danso and a wealth of centre-back talent on loan. Romero is easier to replace. Where Romero isn't easier to replace is on the ball, in my opinion. But in terms of our actual defensive play, I think Van de Ven is an absolute Rolls Royce we need to keep, and we need to keep him fit. Eugene about Ange says, I think Ange should be given a choice whether to stay or not. If he chooses to leave, he leaves with his head held high. If he stays, there needs to be changes. We need to cap the league losses. Agreed. Ryan Perry, lol, says, we have coaches. That's very funny. Di says, I think Ange will be the manager for the start of the season. Poch will get sacked as the US coach before the World Cup. And once Ange hits some bad form, Levy won't be able to help himself. Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a chance Pochettino might be the next manager. Murphy asks, any thoughts on Mikey Moore's future? He'll be a Spurs player for many years, and he'll be brilliant as he gets better and better. And Checkmate, going back to the Leroy Sane thing, says Sane is on 243 grand a week. He isn't going to Spurs. I think you're probably right. B. Chris asks, Barnaby, who do you want other than Eze? I like Ryan Cherki, mate. I talked about him at the beginning of this video. I'd love him to come to Spurs. Do press that like button, guys, if you haven't already. Some transfer rumours from Liverpool. Obviously, they've made their first official bid for Florian Wirtz. That's a scary signing for them. They're looking at Ekatike from Eintracht Frankfurt, who played so well against Spurs. That's if they manage to get a buyer for Darwin Núñez. Liverpool also interested in selling Jarell Quansah. Any Spurs fans here, would you be interested in him as a centre-back? They're looking to get £30 million for him. Apparently Leverkusen, Dortmund, Forest, Bournemouth, Brentford, Everton and Newcastle all interested. Do you like Quansah? Let me know. Napoli are going to get Kevin De Bruyne, £23 million, 3-year deal. And also Man City have asked for the conditions about Ryan El-Nouri from Wolves. He's a really excellent fullback. One, again, I'd love to be on Spurs' list, but doesn't seem to be at the moment. City are ramping up their pursuit of AC Milan and Netherlands midfielder Tajani Renders. Over to Chelsea, Liam Delap apparently leaning towards them at the moment. They've also discussed a move for Ekatike, and apparently they made an offer for Ansu Fati, which seems a bit unrealistic because his form has not been great over the last few years since he was actually rumoured to be being bought by Spurs, wasn't he, a few years ago, but ended up on loan at Brighton. Something funny from Chelsea. Apparently Kepa, their keeper, has a £5 million release clause now after they paid £72 million for him just 5 years ago. Embarrassing from Chelsea. Barcelona, over to Newcastle now. Barcelona apparently working on a plan to sign Alexander Isak from Newcastle in a year's time. They want to pair him with Atletico Madrid's Julian Alvarez. But Barcelona don't have a great deal of money, so who knows whether that will happen. Newcastle also interested in Liam Delap, as well as Brighton's Brazilian forward João Pedro. Arsenal are still interested in Victor Gyökeres, and they're interested in Rafael Leao as well as alongside Manchester City, Morgan Gibbs-White, another player who was on Tottenham's list. Are there any of those players that I've talked about that you would like Spurs to buy? Let me know in the comments. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comments before I finish off this first of my seasons, silly seasons, this transfer window's transfer reports. Let's have a look at what you're going to, what you're saying. Robert Yee says, I want a manager that doesn't invert the fullbacks against low block clubs. It's inviting low block clubs or managers to know who know how to counter it. Yeah. Let's see what else you guys are saying. Eugene says, I don't want Ange to be a repeat of Ten Hag and Man United, leave on a high or stay and turn the league around. Yeah, I've said it before, but the real difference is that Ange is really loved by the players, I think, whereas Ten Hag wasn't really. Ed M says, Kwanzaa, not for me. He's barely Premier League level. Murphy369 agrees with me. Yeah, I hope we sign Cherki. Brilliant player. Kieran Proper says, what do we have to do to get Xavi Simons? He's my dream signing. There's a lot of smoke. Yeah, there have been talks about Spurs and Xavi Simons, but there are big clubs interested in him from RB Leipzig at the moment. So watch this space. Boy Max says we should have a go at getting Grealish, but wages might be too high for us. Yeah, I'm not really that bothered or interested in a player who's had his big move and is on massive wages. Di says Scott McTominay would be brilliant for us. I think Scott McTominay is a fascinating case study. A player deemed by Manchester United fans to kind of almost not be sexy enough for them. They're too big a club to have someone who's come up through the academy and isn't kind of, is deemed to be like almost like a workhorse. But he's proven over in Napoli that he is an absolutely fantastic player. And we were looking at a kind of players for the 6 role last season. I mean, I think McTominay is more of a 6'8", but we looked at Conor Gallagher from Chelsea, didn't we? And I have to say, a lot of Spurs fans looked at that signing as not kind of sexy enough. But those players are all important. And I think, Conte realizes that at Napoli, and he realized that at Spurs, didn't he? Because he was looking at similar players. But I think Tottenham fans sometimes, I think we all have to be a little less, we can only buy sexy flair players, and realize that those players like McTominay, like Gallagher are important. Alexis Portia says, do you think they're working on Cherki or Mbeumo? Makes me nuts that they haven't said what they're doing on the manager yet. Like I said on this TikTok video I sent earlier, I do fear that Levy is just trying to wait for the excitement around Big Ange to calm down, and then he's going to sack the manager. I think there are talks with Cherki. Not sure about Mbeumo, but I think maybe there should be. C9 Manic says Justin Kluivert is a player I'd love at Spurs. Don't see many rumours about him. I want us to have players with a bit more physicality than Kluivert, personally. I think we've got one too many small players. We need to be a bit more physical, personally. The Outlaw says Man United didn't look good after firing Ten Hag. That's absolutely true, and something that Levy should look at as well. Ed M says I'd take Harvey Elliott from Liverpool. Good competition for Maddison. I like Harvey Elliott a lot, but again, I want a bit more physicality in our team. I really do. So as long as we bought a few more physical players alongside Elliott or players like that, that's fine. But let's see what happens. Nick in Hong Kong says, hi, Barnaby. Are we still looking at Kyle Walker-Peters? Not from what I know of, but he would make a really good fullback option. And Ed M says, really like Mbeumo. Listen, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's Premier League transfer talk. Please do press that like button if you haven't already. And if you're not a subscriber, please do press that subscribe button for daily Premier League transfer talk, always starting with my team, Tottenham Hotspur, of course. And enjoy the rest of your hump day, guys. Let's see what transfer rumours stump up whilst all Tottenham fans like myself are waiting to hear what's happening with our manager. Cheers, guys. Have a good one. Goodbye.